So, when we go through this, there's a couple things that we notice how it's authenticated. Jesus talks about Daniel. And besides Jesus talking about him, we find it in Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 is the chapter called the Hall of Faith. When you read that, it speaks a lot about men of faith, women of faith, things that have happened, events that have occurred. And when you see the things that were done, they're miraculous. And you can read that. I mean, Hebrews 11 is fantastic. But in verse 33, he says, who through faith subdued kingdoms and wrought righteousness, obtained promises, and stopped the mouths of the lions. That's pretty cool that this thing that we're going to go over tonight is used in Hebrews as an act of faith, with God. Now, as we start going through this, the very first thing that we see is Darius. Now, when we look at this, so that you get kind of a play card of who we're talking about, we had Nebuchadnezzar. That was the first king of Babylon. And then we have his son that took over after he died, Nebuchadnezzar. And then it went through people until it got down to, say, his grandson, where that was Belshazzar. So we see these names coming up, and we went through that list where there was a bunch of different ones, but the very next one that was a substantial ruler here was Darius. Now, Darius is actually not a name of a person. It would be as if we said general, or as if we said president, or as if we said governor. He's somebody that's a title. So when they take that on, it means the holder of the scepter, the person that's in charge. Darius might have been another name for Cyrus. This is one of their ideas. Daniel 6:28, when we get there you'll see it. It may be translated, so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, even the reign of Cyrus the Persian. If it's translated that, then that means we're talking about Cyrus being called Darius, the guy that's in charge of Babylon. Okay. So the other one here is that Darius the Mede could be identified with Cambrius. Now, Cambrius is Cyrus's son, who also ruled in Persia, but did he rule Babylon specifically? That's a question. The third one is, another explanation, is that Darius was appointed by Cyrus to rule over Babylon, a small portion of it's a huge empire, it's gigantic, but Babylon here is just a part of it. So when you see this, Daniel 9:1 says, Darius was made ruler over the Babylonian kingdom. So another explanation is possible. Now the fourth one, and why I didn't get it up there, I have no idea. I actually believe it was General Ugbaru, because he was the general that did that. He took it over. So that would have been something that Cyrus did do. Now Cyrus wasn't with him. Cyrus showed up later on, and that's when Daniel met him at the gates. When he came in, Daniel met him at the gates with the scroll of Isaiah, and he says, I have something for you. And the scroll of Isaiah had been written 150 years earlier. And it literally, we went over the verses, it literally speaks about Cyrus by name. So he didn't come on that first conquering run. It was this general that came in, took over, got it settled, got word back, we got it, come on in. And then he came in and got the word. So that's why I think that this general was the one, when we talk about Darius, that's him. In this story anyway. He wasn't there for long. They had another ruler that come in afterwards. All right, so with that, we'll jump in here on verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and the satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. Now, when you look at this, because we've gone through it the way we've done it, you've already got an idea of Daniel now. If you think about this, Daniel is at least 83 years old. He has served here for 66 years. Remember when we started this? 17 years old, he got grabbed up. He now is 83 years old. So he's got 66 years in public office, and he is still in a position of honor. Daniel was an exceptional administrator, partly because his extensive experience under Nebuchadnezzar. 39 years he was under Nebuchadnezzar. He went through everything. He learned how to deal with people and how to run. I mean, in our different jobs that we've done in our lives, we've been over something, maybe just one person or something like that. This is an entire empire that he was over with Nebuchadnezzar, and he trusted him, put him in charge of it. So you can see where this guy is now, Daniel. Now remember, there was 120. Now I'm just going to come up with some names so you get an idea what we're talking about. Call them mayors. Okay, 120 of them, and then say above them there were 3, call them governors. This wasn't necessarily that there was 120 areas. There was just 120 of these guys, and 3 of the governors were over them. And Daniel was the most senior of the 3. So out of all of those 123 people, Daniel's over the top of the whole thing.
Satrap is another word for government officials?
Yes. Yes. It's a leader. He's got power. He's got some, and this does fall into the Magi. This does fall into the. So they have authority, but they even have authority because of who they are. And this is where you go into some of the things that we know. They, at first, we were kind of led to believe, well, these guys were astrologers. You're going to find that in a lot of your Bible helps. That's actually incorrect. They were not Zoroaster. And I'm probably saying that wrong. It was something that happened much later. It did come along, but it wasn't primary. So they weren't astrologers. And that's one of the things people try to bring up when we see the Magi coming to the birth of Jesus. Well, they knew the stars, and that's why they came, because there was going to be these stars. The problem with that is the star that showed up above Jesus was miraculous. It wouldn't have been something they would have been able to chart out like an astrologer would have. It was miraculous, like Jonah's fish. It wasn't a whale, it was a fish. So what they were good at, though, and go figure, it's called iromancy. They interpreted dreams. So you start seeing these dreams that are coming up, and you start seeing that Daniel understands them, and then you see that's where a lot of this is going on with these guys. That's why God had given him that gift. Now these guys that we're seeing here, they are part of a hereditary group. They were Persians, they were born Persians, they raised up in the ranks of being Persians, and yet this old Jewish man gets put in charge of them. So you can already start, use your imagination. Humans are humans. They are going to fall to their lowest level. They are always going to do the bad thing. Back then was no different. You've got this old Jewish man that was put in. Now think about this. He was the guy. What did Belshazzar tell him at the end? If you can come in and tell me what that writing is, I'm going to make you third in the kingdom. Third only because his father was first. So actually he'd be second in the kingdom. I'm going to give you a purple robe. I'm going to give you a gold chain. Basically, I'm putting you in charge. And Daniel said, doesn't matter. You're dying tonight anyway. So when they come in, Daniel's number 1. He gets killed. That guy gets killed. Daniel's the guy. He brings the scroll to Cyrus now. He jumps, keeps position, and jumps from Babylon to the enemy's Persian. And he still holds his position. That in itself is just a miracle. They go in, they kill all the enemy, and they move on. They got all their guys they need. They put them in place. So when we look at that, and we see that kind of timeline that he's been on, he rose from a slave to the advisor. He stays in office all those years. His life's even threatened a couple times. And then when their conquered Persia comes in, he steps up. Why didn't they have their own people do it? Why didn't they do that? You see, within the very first year here, he's going to get attacked again. Just like he was getting attacked by the other guys that were there. These are pagan, cultured empires. These guys worshipped everything but God. Matter of fact, they worshipped Satan. We went through all the names and we went through all the things that were going on. So these guys are completely seated in satanic influence. There's no way Daniel would have ever risen to the surface. Because in the natural, he started off as just this slave. First off, don't even want to eat their food. So he wouldn't have made it. Yet, here he goes. Climbs to the top every single time. And now, here he is, the head of not one, but two consecutive. How did this happen? What does that verse say? He has an excellent spirit. We've all been at our jobs. We've been around something where there's a supervisor over us, and there was something. They should have hated us. They should have done everything they could do to put us down, but for some reason, we just float to the top. For some reason, it's that excellent spirit. And that excellent spirit is where we have honesty, loyalty only to God. Remember the times, you're going to see it in this one specifically, but remember the times that they would say, do this or else. No. Do this or we'll kill you. Okay, go ahead. Look at the people around. Look at the leaders around. And they look at that and they go, that's integrity. They won't find that integrity for their people. Keep worshiping Lucifer, or stop worshiping Lucifer, or I'll kill you. No, I'll worship whatever you want, just don't kill me. They don't have that kind of integrity. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you have that excellent spirit. He works hard and honestly for earthly supervisors. You notice he doesn't dig his heels in? He would never have gone up in Babylon and done well in the Persian Empire if he wasn't good at his job. I mean, there's no other reason. He has no family that's keeping him in place. There's no other reason to keep him. He did a really good job. So they put him in place. And it was a track record of the stuff that he actually did, not just verbal commitments. How many people that are telling you, oh, I can do this and I can do that, and then some years later and you go, that guy hasn't done nothing. But yet you watch when people just get things done. All of a sudden this whole department's fixed. Or all of a sudden this is getting done. It's smoother, cost effective, whatever. There's no more drama in the shop, whatever it is. And people are sitting back looking at that going, that's incredible. Ever since that guy showed up, it's just been, well, they're contributing that to the incredible spirit that's inside us. And that's what he's seeing with Daniel. All right, so we'll go to 4. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful. Nor was there any error or fault found in him. These men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. They already figured that out. When you think about this, pride and jealousy will lead men to attack somebody else, a colleague they're working with, right? Somebody they're working right with. They will start to attack them because they're more competent than themselves. How many people do you know that when they don't do the job as good, they got to run somebody else down? You're just lazy. The guy, I mean, you look at him and you just go, you're just lazy, but yet that's the guy that's making all the ruckus about everybody else because he just can't pull the job off. So it's jealousy, it's pride that always rises up in that situation. A man in the kingdom of God will prompt men in the kingdom of the world to display a more extreme bitterness towards them. See, you both are just getting the job done. You're side by side, just getting the job done. He says, hey, let's go do this, some ungodly thing. And you go, no, I'm not a part of it. Then all of a sudden, you're a target. And they're going to find that button and they're going to push it every time they can. You know, guys will do something like, hey, check this out. And you'll, come on, man, I don't need to look at that stuff. And they start doing that. They're pushing the buttons because of pride, because they're trying to find, because you're excelling. You're happy, you're peaceful, you're functioning, your job is good, and you're just trucking right along, everything's good. They're miserable, they're hopeless, and they're really ticked off that you're doing a better job than they are, and you're happy. So this is where this kind of thing functions. That's why I'm saying, what people are people. What we saw back then, it's already happening today, and it's in our everyday life. Now think about this. 122 men could not find any dirt on Daniel. We got elections coming up again. It's going to happen exactly like it does every election season. They're going to dig up dirt that's going to go all the way back to when he spit on some kid in preschool. It doesn't make any difference what you do. Good guy, bad guy, in between, everybody. J. Edgar, he had files on people just for this purpose. As they started climbing the ladders, be they superstars, movie stars, politicians, military, he kept files on them. And he would constantly just file it away. And if that guy ever had something, he'd just pull the file out and say, well, let's see. Because he had dirt on him. 122 men could not find any dirt on Daniel. Do you know what kind of life that would have to take? No dirt. It wouldn't take, for most of us, it wouldn't take 24 hours and they go, I got a bag full, you know? So, no error, no fault. We will not find any fault against him unless we find it against a relationship with him and God. Put Daniel today, okay? We won't get him if we raise the taxes. Do you think things like that happened in their kingdom? Think there were taxes? Think there was money? Sure. They raised the taxes. Still couldn't find dirt on him. We won't get him if we make homosexual marriage legal in the kingdom. You think that stuff was going on? No dirt still. We won't get him if we implement our empire-wide Darius Care health insurance program. No dirt. Think about this. No dirt. They could not find anything against him. But we will get him if we get him to try to worship something else other than God, Jehovah. Our relationship with the Father is the only thing we're supposed to be concerned with. Not all of this nonsense that keeps us misdirected. Because when we see things like Westboro Baptist Church getting nutty and doing all of the things that they did, how does that affect us? Satan does stuff like that just to get you off balance. What is the goal? Preach the gospel. Then what? Make disciples. Preach the gospel, make disciples. Preach the gospel, make disciples. This is what we're supposed to do. And how do we do that? In an era of love, loving each other. Preach the gospel, make disciples, in love, keep going. All of these other side things, hey, by all means go vote. Put your X in the box, and then move on. Because when this kind of stuff happens, they will find no dirt on you. That doesn't mean become a cookie cutter person where you got to do what everybody else does. Have an opinion. But there you go. I made my opinion. Move on. Get back to the original goal. Daniel did. That's why they couldn't find dirt on him. Everything else we concerned about enough to pray for change. Do you think Daniel sat down and prayed for change for the evil that was going on in that kingdom? I absolutely do. Absolutely. He's praying for change in there. Okay, so think about this. Do you think that Daniel prayed to take him out of that empire? Can you see Daniel saying, God, Yahweh, take me home, back to Jerusalem. Take me back. I don't want to be here. This is disgusting and evil. Take me back. Or did Daniel say, God, use me whatever you need me to do wherever I'm at? He floated to the top of not one but two pagan empires, world pagan empires. How would that happen? He said, use me. Is there any other way that God could get a believer right next to Nebuchadnezzar? No way. There's no way. But he was obedient. He was faithful. And he said, I'm here, use me. What did Isaiah say? Here am I, Lord, send me. And that's what's happening. They couldn't find any dirt because he was like Paul. He said, I'm content. I'm content when I got a lot. I'm content when I got little. I'm content when I'm here and I'm content when I'm there. I'm content when I'm stuck in Babylon. I'm content when I'm stuck in Persia. Because wherever it is, God's with me. If we start wishing that we were somewhere else but the grass is always greener, what if God's not with you and the grass is always greener? What if God wants you here? And you start going, I'm going to go where the grass is greener. God's going to go, well, I'm not with you over there. I'm with you right here. So he did. He stayed right there. So now it's kind of putting, wait a minute, 66 years this guy did this. And he's still doing it? 80 years old, this guy's like, he reminds me of Polycarp. 107 years old. How could I turn on God? This is what I've been doing. So it really shows the real man of God that we're seeing here. Now in verse 6, so these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said to him, King Darius, live forever. All of the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and the satrap, the governors, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree. Just stop for a second. Is that a true statement? All the governors of the kingdom? No. Daniel didn't agree to that. So they're already making stuff up. That whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. So all of these petitions, or any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, this is an assumed divinity of kings. You're going to see this a lot. The same thing happened with Esther. There's going to be some parallels here, because who was Esther dealing with? The Persians. It was Xerxes. Same thing. They would worship the king as though he were God. You're trying to see a pattern here. They would worship, even like Pharaoh. They did the same thing. And we'll see it again with the man in the last days. They'll worship him as though he was God. So now we'll go to 8. 8 says, Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. Therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Now when Daniel heard that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. See, Daniel knew when it was signed, because he'd heard it. Okay, it's signed. You don't think there was a buzz going around? He was one of the governors. He heard it. So when he heard it was signed, he continued as usual, didn't he? When you think about this, he didn't increase his, religious activities, or he didn't decrease them. What had been signed didn't affect his life. How many times have you heard, if you thought the rapture was going to happen tomorrow, what would you do? You should say, nothing different than what I'm doing today. Because if you increase it, that means you're not doing what you should be doing today. And if you decrease it, that means you're kicking it into neutral. So if they increase it, have you ever seen guys who just love to push buttons? As soon as something happens, say you're inside your job, and all of a sudden, the Christians that are inside that place, all of a sudden, they're really starting to take company time to do stuff. I mean, all of a sudden, we got Bible studies going on when work needs to get done. Everybody's talking about this, and not everybody's a believer in there. So finally, management has to say, hey, come on, let's get back to work here. That shouldn't be offensive to a Christian. Colossians 3, we need to be working for our employers as though we're working for Jesus. That's the thing that's the good spirit within us. But yet, as soon as that word goes out, we need to cut that back. Some yahoo thinks, this is a great opportunity for me to make a point. You can't stop me from doing this, and I have religious rights, and this is the Third Amendment, and you've got to... These are knuckleheads. And most of the time, those guys that start yapping, they weren't even involved in this Bible study to begin with. They're just finding an opportunity to try to push somebody's button, and it happens to be this. So they start trying to increase to make a point. They don't decrease either. How about people that hear that same thing, and all of a sudden, they won't even talk about Jesus at all? None. Not even at lunch. Not even on a break, because they're afraid. Daniel didn't do either one. He just went about his business. That means he was absolutely confident about what he was doing. Whatever it was his life was, he knew that it's what needed to be done. He didn't increase. He didn't decrease. When we start talking about prayer, it's funny because I left them up there. There's a lot of verses in there if you want to take notes to them. But prayer needs to be a habit for us. We need to have something where it's not I'm praying because it's an emergency, like the ripcord, like you're sitting in the emergency seat on the airplane. And it needs to not be something where it's, good bread, good meat, thanks God, let's eat.
Prayer, is it your steering wheel or your spare tire?
Yes. Prayer is either your steering wheel or it's your spare tire. And it needs to be something that you do. It's a part of your life. It's not something that you do because, oh my gosh, God help. That doesn't mean he won't answer, but that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be in constant communication. It says pray without ceasing in Thessalonians. So we're supposed to have that life of prayer, which Daniel had. And if you take a look at this, his windows were open. He wasn't hiding this.
As was the usual.
As was the usual. This is what he did.
He didn't hang out a banner out there saying, I'm protesting.
Yep. Now, even Solomon said to pray towards their land. David did the same thing. There's verses for it up there. The New Testament, John 4:21 through 24 talks about how prayer's like that. So you see that this is something that is continual. On our knees even. Yeah, the Lord prayed on his knees, Luke 21:41. And it's honored for not kneeling. Now, I think we're all sophisticated enough to understand. You could pray anywhere. You could pray driving down the street. You could pray walking around. But the idea being, where's your heart at? Where's your heart at? Just the simple term of worship means a kiss forward. It's a submission. When you're in praise and worship and there's hands raised up, I mean, it's a submission. This is what you're doing. So this being on our knees is a submission that we're doing. This is what Daniel was doing 3 times a day even. There's a verse for that too. Psalm 55:16 and 17, 3 times a day. So even Acts has got this. So prayer is something that it didn't just come up with the New Testament. This is something that has been happening since long ago, and it was legitimate. It was genuine.
I looked it up. It was actually 1 Kings 8:48. That's where it was in the middle of Solomon dedicating the temple. And Solomon says, when the people are carried away into captivity, and if they turn to you and pray towards your land, and it's kind of like, how many times have I read the story of Solomon? Yeah, okay, Solomon's dedicating the temple and God prayed and, okay, fine. Daniel knew that and put it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
He also knew an obscure Psalm 55, verse 17 says, in the evening, morning, and noon will I pray.
That's right.
It's like, holy cow.
And that was a song we sang in Sunday school. Love him in the morning, love him in the evening, right?
And the other thing, too, that I was thinking of is on this whole thing. When does Satan attack us? When we want to get closer to God, specifically through prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about you going out and feeding the homeless.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care about you going to church on Sunday.
Right.
Don't you pray.
Right.
You start praying, I'm going to do everything I can to stop you.
Mm-hmm. Because that'll hurt me. That's going to do damage to me.
It's one of those weapons.
Yeah.
Ephesians, what was it?
Ephesians 6, 10 to the end. Prayer was number 7. Now, if you notice, does this sound like this is something where he would go, well, hey, I'm going to go home and pray. This is good. I mean, they just said, you're going to get tossed in the lions. If you don't do this, you're going to get tossed. He goes home in the middle of danger. Prayer is there. And if you think about this, let's make this real for us. Our own country was founded by men who knew and believed in the power of prayer. That first boat that hit the shores that winter, half of them died. And then the next year, half or better died again. And these guys stood and they prayed and they stuck, and then they started to thrive. Then they started to be alive. They started to move. It's only by God taking care of us that America is here at all. We would have been dead that first year.
First Congress was a 2-hour prayer and Bible study.
There you go.
2 hours. Yeah.
Jefferson held church and taught a message out of the Bible in the Capitol Rotunda. So that separation of church and state, the reality of that statement is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Declaration. It is from a letter from the Baptist that went to Jefferson himself, and they said, what's going on here? We left because of persecution, because we wanted to worship as we wanted to. What is this Congress you're putting together? What is this government you're arranging? Is it going to affect us? And his statement to them was, there will be a wall of separation between the church and the state. The state will have nothing to say about your religion. Not the other way around. And not one person can quote where that actually came from. Dave Barton. You want to look up something for that kind of stuff? Dave Barton, Wall Builders. He'll explain it. But prayer is where we came from. I mean, this is why we're here. How did Refuge get here? How does anything function normally? Prayer. God answers prayer. Fact. All right, so in verse 12, and they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. And this is what they tell him. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Did he sign it? They knew he did. Then why did they ask? They're setting a trap. They're wanting to make sure that the last piece of their trap is in place. You did sign that, right? Did you sign it? Okay, good. Because I just want to make sure that you signed it. Because in 13, so they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, really? 66 years this man has served the king of Babylon. And the king of Persia has thought enough to put him in charge of this. And they've got to come off with a slur like that? Slander him like that? This Daniel, who's one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard to you, O king. Who do you think put him there? They're saying he doesn't show. This is the guy, or Cyrus is the guy that put him there. And you're saying he doesn't honor that you... Really? It's an insult. It was a backhanded slam to the king. Are you starting to see some animosity here between these guys? Watch this. This is incredible. And it's a deep root too. So pay attention to it. It doesn't show any regard to you, O king, for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with who? He wasn't displeased with Daniel. He wasn't displeased with these knuckleheads standing in front of him. You getting a little bit of more respect for this Darius? He was displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. What do you think he did? He probably went out there and he was checking the royal attorneys. You know, he calls Larry H. Parker and he tells him, no way, Jose. He's out. Now, here's the thing.
Which counselor did he call? Because all the counselors are sitting there.
Yeah, they're all sitting there. So he's checking with whoever he can. It says he checked until the sun went down. He couldn't do it. Here's the thing. In Persia, see, now in Nebuchadnezzar's world, in Babylon, the king says, everybody's eating tomatoes today. And then he goes, no, I changed my mind. Anyone that eats tomatoes, I kill you. You're eating oranges. And he could do what he wanted at will, because that's what he did in Babylon. When Persia, this is different.
Kingdom of Gold.
Right. This is where we've got Persian rule goes like this. Persian rule says, when the king signs it, oh, that's it, man. You know, hey, the king makes the rules for himself as well. And he has to live by those rules, and he can't change whatever was written. So this is the Persian thing that we see. You're going to find, I'll go over in a second, but remember with Esther, same kind of story happened. Remember Haman? Let me grab 15 here real quick, and then we'll see this. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. Who are you talking to? Really? Oh, you're kidding me. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. He couldn't reverse this law. If you want to look this up, it's Esther 1, and it's verse 19, and Esther 8, verse 8. Haman had gotten Xerxes to sign it that says, death to the Jews. Esther was already married to the king, right? And the king figures out, the wife that I care about, she replaced Vashti. And my wife that I care about is a Jew, and they're going to kill her. So you see the tension that's going to get built up between Haman and Xerxes. It's the same kind of thing that's happening here with these guys. So you see Daniel here getting tossed in. Where's his comfort coming from? The king. The king himself is building him up. And he's saying the buck doesn't stop with the king, small k. The buck stops with the king. And he knows it. Whom you serve continually. What a witness. What a witness. This guy's going to get dropped in, and he says the one that you serve, he knows it. He sees it. Are we that kind of witness? This is where our witness makes a difference, because you have no idea when the time might come when you might get dropped into the lion's den. And if you don't act with that godly character, they won't be able to say whom you serve continually. If you're wishy-washy, if you're lukewarm, if you're, is it okay for Christians to, you got to, what's that?
A wet noodle?
Yeah, a Christian wet noodles. You don't want to be a wet noodle, you get dropped in. Lions like them. 17. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords. And the purpose concerning Daniel, might not be changed. Why'd there have to be two? If it's a done deal, it's a done deal. If he made the order, they made the order. Two. They sealed it because they wanted to make sure he didn't go try to change it. So that's why they put two seals on that rock. That way, they knew if something had happened, if somebody messed with it. Can you see the distrust, the animosity is getting built up between these guys? He goes and seals it, and they go, here, we'll seal it too, just to make sure. They're really pushing the issue here on some things. Now, when the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him, and sleep went from before him. When you see this, you got to think. He's fasting. He's in his room where he sleeps, fasting, no music, and he's not sleeping. What do you think that king did during that long, quiet night? Think he broke his own commandment? Think he broke his own law? Because he's already saying, Daniel, the one that you worship continuously. You don't think that king, you can see this kindred spirit that he's got going on with Nebuchadnezzar, how much he cared about Daniel. You don't think he said, I don't know if you're up there.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, everything I've seen from this guy says you're real and you're powerful. And if you are who Daniel says you are, take care of him.
I'm sure he probably heard the stories of what happened.
You don't think they heard him?
I don't think he was a true believer, because otherwise he would have spent that night trying to figure out how he could get Daniel out of it.
Right.
But he did have, it took a lot for a pagan king to go up and say, I think your God can save you.
And this is starting to be the same pattern that we saw. Remember Belshazzar? Remember the grandson? He didn't immediately go, oh, somebody go get Daniel. He went, go get my people. Oh, they couldn't figure it out. And then grandma comes in and says, hey, there's a guy named Daniel. And then he calls him. And then he goes, hey, I heard about you. So he wasn't in tune either. But he became, didn't he, after he saw it. Same thing with this guy. He heard about the stuff that was going on. You don't think these stories echoed? If you ask somebody about a Malaysian airliner right now, do you think there'd be one person that goes, what are you talking about? You don't think these stories echo through that empire? About Daniel? You don't think that might be part of the reason why they said, let's keep him? There are some stories about this guy have the aeromancy, the interpreter of dreams.
Think of you've heard this before, the similarities between the Lincoln assassination and the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
How many of those similarities can you name off the top of your head? And that happened, what, 100
Sure.
apart?
Yeah.
And we still know that stuff.
And we can still figure it out. This kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah.
This is earth-shaking.
Yeah.
Look at the parallels between Christ and this. By law, he was supposed to die, right? John 19:7. The stone that was rolled in front, right? The stone was sealed. Remember? He said he sealed it, just like this one was. The power of resurrection. It was the power of God that kept him alive. He came out of that because of the power of God that was there. Sleepless in the palace. Remember? She told him, she goes, don't have anything to do with this guy. And they didn't. They didn't sleep. There's a lot of parallels here.
Not the first time, though, that he's obviously been sentenced to die. So, there's obviously a larger force behind the fact that he's being taken care of by
Oh, yeah.
the Lord all the time.
His hand's with him all the time.
All the time.
Everything. And do you think that he even got rattled at all? No.
No, he seemed to be very calm, very even keel.
He was absolutely confident in God. He knew. He never got carried away. He never got crazy. He never got depressed. He just functioned. This is what I do. Daniel is one of the only two men in the Bible that no sin is required. He's not sinless. Don't go there. But him and Joseph, Jesus, but Daniel and Joseph are the only two that no sin's actually ever recorded of them. And Joseph, similar. Look at all the stuff he went through. You don't see him freaking out. So 19, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. In 20, and he came to the den and he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. You can feel this guy's heart for Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God. Look at that. That's incredible. Has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? How would you like to be called that by somebody? Servant of the living God. That's incredible. O king, live forever. Do you hear any bitterness or anger coming out of Daniel? O king, live forever. I'm fine. Isn't that nutty?
He's probably freaking out. I've never freaked
This guy's, yeah. I'll bet Daniel slept. Come here, kitty. He's chilling. But you don't hear any bitterness coming out of him. How many of us would be like, let me at him. Set me up, I'll fix you.
Least of all, you don't hear Daniel first. So he comes up and says, Daniel, are you okay? Yes, now get me out of here.
Yeah, hurry up.
Yeah.
Get that rock out of the way.
Yeah.
Throw a rope down.
No.
Help a brother out.
Oh, king, live forever.
Yeah, totally calm. Why did that happen? Because Daniel believed in God. He literally relied on him with his life. Do you think if he would have even thought, oh man, I'm done. You think if he'd have thought, you know what, maybe I'll just close the curtains today instead of leaving them open. God wouldn't be too upset if I didn't pray today. I mean, it won't be that big of a deal. I could pray quietly. I'm still praying, right? How many of the Christians would be like, well, I'm still praying. I don't necessarily have to be. Well, God never really wanted us to pray out in public anyway. Maybe I was being a little boastful being at my window every day. All these excuses. If he would have did that, think he'd live through this?
No.
Compromise. Compromise will kill you. And you think it's not a compromise. You think it's not a big deal. You think it's, no, it's okay. I've got freedom in Christ to do this. That's compromise.
I don't necessarily think that he wouldn't have survived it. I think he would never have been put to the trial. I think we wouldn't have had a book written by him if he hadn't.
Okay? Could be. Went off into oblivion. We never heard the story. Could be. So, 21. Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. Who's he found innocent before? God. Who should we be concerned about? God. Does it make any difference what everybody around you thinks? Shouldn't. Because everybody around you does not have the power to shut the mouths of the lions. Only God does. And he found me innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. By faith. Hebrews 11:33, right? Secret of safety, the breastplate of righteousness. That armor of God wasn't something that Paul came up with for the New Testament believers. That's something that's been in our Bible from Genesis 1. That armor is there. It's been there. It's what happens. It's how we live. The just shall live by faith, and it starts in Genesis 1. That's how they live by faith. And this is what he's doing. 23. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him. I'll bet he was. Think he was crying? I think he was. And commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. That is so awesome. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men that had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the lion's den. Them, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them and broke all of their bones in pieces before they came to the bottom of the den. 122 men. And their wives, and their children also. I'm calculating 500 people conservatively. Wife and a couple kids. Think about this. Just like Haman's fate in Esther, you remember what happened? Haman had concocted this thing where they hung them all on the gallows, constructed the gallows for them. End result, Haman was the one that got hung on that. Esther 7, 9, and 10. So, just like these 500 people, they were all munched in that lion's den. 500 people. Now here's what's funny. You look at this story, and the people that are constantly trying to say that this book has fables, it's not real, it's got all kinds of contradictions, I've heard all of it. This is one of the stories where they go, that's not a miracle. They were old lions. They were weak. Throw them in there. They're getting ready to die anyway. All right. If we look at this and start trying to figure out how these people are trying to explain this away, they've done it with the other stories too. The parting of the Red Sea. Well, it was only a few inches deep. The wind came and it kind of blew it flat, and okay, I'll take that. Because that means it was a bigger miracle. That means God killed the entire Pharaoh's army in just a few inches of water. How about this? Well, the fiery furnace. Well, it wasn't hot. You know, they didn't really have it heated up. I mean, they lived through it because there was cold spots and it wasn't that. That's because that means God killed those 7 men that were out front there that was getting it hot and throwing them in. He killed them with what? Cold air. And this one right here, that's interesting because Daniel was thrown in for lions from the old folks' home. Yet 24 hours later, these old animals here, they ate 500 people. Before they touched the ground even. So I don't know what Bible they're looking at, but this one right here screams miracle every single time. What's a miracle? It's a supernatural intervention into the natural scheme of things. Animals, they would have eaten him. That would have been it. How many stories have we been seeing with these idiots that think it's fun to go play at the zoo and jump the fence? And you want to talk about old folks' home, those things just sit around and munch all day. You'd think those guys would just be like, leave me alone, it's nap time. But they'll munch them.
And these lions were not like petting zoo kind of lions. They were kept
For this purpose.
in the state of almost
Yep.
starvation.
Yep.
For this purpose.
They've actually proved this, just like, I didn't bring up all of the archaeology, but just like we found the furnaces, they were legit. They were there, and they knew where they were, and they knew which one it was. Well, just like that, they knew that Persia, that was their thing. They dug a pit, they threw the lions inside there, and that's how they would execute people. That's how they did. And that was kind of like Rome with the crosses. Those crosses were lined up at the city. So as you walked into one of the Roman cities and you saw the crosses up there, what did you think? I ain't doing that. And the crimes posted above their head. Ooh, burglary, murder, rape. Oh, whoa, be good in this place. I don't want to end up there. That's why they did it. That's what these guys were doing. So when Daniel came out that next morning, he was the one who had gained in the whole deal. The king approved him and admired him and loved him, but everybody heard of it They're going, that's the guy. I mean, it's almost like if paparazzi existed, this guy's the whole 66 years they'd have been following him around waiting for something else to happen. The king wasn't regarded half as much of a god as Daniel was. And then the counselors never bothered him again because the lions had, what would that be, breakfast maybe? Yeah, it's probably lunch. Probably lunch.
ch6 is mastery over
Mastery, oh good. Oh good. Yeah, I bet they did. Salt and pepper.
Something that I kind of picked up on that was not only were these counselors, but then their wives and their children. And it just, one of the things that Corson had brought up was when we sin, we think, oh, well, it just affects me.
Oh no. Oh yeah, good point. Oh, good point. Absolutely. Any one of us that thinks that we've got these little private sins and they never affect us, you're absolutely wrong. I don't care. Matter of fact, the more private you think the sin is, the more it's going to affect your family. And that's basically what we're talking about here. You start having these secret sins slipping inside your door, you are opening up the door to your house to let something come in. And if you put it into the physical, would you open up the door and have a rapist come into your house? No. Would you open up the door and have a child molester come in your home? No. Then why are you doing it in the spiritual? There are things that we've got going on that we think no one knows. Characters who you are when no one's looking. Guess what? You're cracking the door up to demonic stuff that you have got to pay attention to. And it doesn't matter what it is. It's all kinds of ugly stuff, but you've got to get a hold of it and you've got to say, hey, this is affecting my whole family. And that is because you take care of each other. You're a unit. As a family, you're one, and you got to go, I'm protecting everybody. It's not just going to hurt them. But these guys, they're being driven by pride. Do you think they cared? What did the wife think? Oh, my husband's a governor. She wore fine clothes. Oh, we've got a new place to live. Look at Babylon. It's so pretty. Boy, I'm glad we conquered this place. This is neat. Next thing you know, somebody shows up, grabs her, and the kids drags them out. What? Next thing you know, what is she thinking as she's falling to the bottom of that pit? What did my husband just do to us?
And that wasn't something God required.
No, that was them. As a matter of fact, the Hebraic law, it was much more lenient than that. I've got quotes for it, but it was much more lenient. Okay, so 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples and nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men, that almost makes you think it's Cyrus, doesn't it? In my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. Another announcement throughout the empire. How many of these announcements have gone out from the Twitter thing? Every time something happens, they Twitter this message out across the kingdom. Think about this. How many times in the 66 years that both of these pagan, now remember, they come in and take over Redlands. Okay, Babylon's running Redlands now. Great. Okay, now Babylon's gone and Persia's running Redlands. We're still here. We're still talking to each other. We got the announcements about this Daniel. And we got the announcements about this Daniel and his friends. And then we get the announcements about Daniel again. Now the Persians take over. Okay, all right, how are we going to be there? Another announcement about Daniel. What are these people in this empire here thinking? How many announcements do these people have to hear about Daniel's God before they all start going, what is this Daniel's God? I need to know about this. I mean, it's going out on the news. It's on the headlines here. 66 years, and they've heard it 3 or 4 times already.
Isn't it like today?
It is. It is. And it makes you wonder that if the Christians actually started walking like the sons that we are called to be, that those kind of announcements would go out. Did you hear about Fred? He had this, did you hear about? It doesn't matter what it is. All of a sudden, the small things that we hear about, even in our work, did you hear about that? He had this big problem with the IRS, and all of a sudden, man, God took care of him. Oh man, did you hear he had cancer? And then the doctor said the cancer's gone. I mean, all these little things that would be coming up. Man, did you hear about that? Oh man, his kid was a mess. Man, did you hear about that kid? All of a sudden, man, that's the kid? Man, he's doing great. Yeah, God took care of him. These announcements would go throughout our kingdom, throughout our area, and hear it.
Maybe we have
Yeah, absolutely. The book of remembrance, right? So, Daniel's God did more than their pagan gods of wood and stone ever did. This was Satan's attempt at extinguishing the light of the living God in Babylon. Similar to Revelation 12. The wrath was restrained. Surely the wrath of man will praise thee. The remainder of wrath shall you restrain. Psalm 76:10. Couple of verses. Who's got hiccups? I got hiccups all the time too. 27. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This is the one I was telling you about. It could be translated, so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, even the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So it could be that. Now, I told you that as often as possible when we go through Daniel, I'm going to try to connect this to something that we're dealing with today. We got application stuff, personal application. But here's something I want you to take a look at. When we look at this, there are parallels here. Okay? The first one is, this is a foreshadowing the man of sin, right? Like the Antichrist, claiming divine honors under the penalty of death. Take the mark of the beast or we're going to cut your head off. The roaring lion that we're supposed to be afraid of, right? It says the devil goes about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, right? 1 Peter 5:8. There's some verses. Yeah, I put them up there. Daniel didn't receive that mark, did he? He was sealed when he went inside there. Here's some lessons. Safety and persecution. Faithfulness of God. Absolutely, right? Inspiring faith of one that is consecrated. This guy was set apart. Just how do we want to walk that out? How do we want to live that out? Blessing of obeying God rather than men. Absolutely. He could have obeyed man and not ended up like that. A reward of separation. God is equal to every emergency. Thou shalt prosper if thou takest heed. This kind of goes back to Deuteronomy 28. All of these blessings if you're honoring my word. This is what he's talking about. Think about this. I just told you that Daniel was one of the only two men that did not, it's not registered that they sinned, right? Why did he get thrown into the lion's den? Does that throw that prosperity gospel in the trash? Nothing is ever supposed to bad happen to you ever. Then what did he do? What was it that Daniel did? How was it that Daniel failed in his faith? How was it that what did Daniel do wrong that put him in the lion's den? Obviously that throws that whole thing in the trash. It's the reverse. It's going to get dark and it's going to get ugly out there. God is not going to bring that lower. God is going to bring us above it. Walk with him, honor the statutes, do what we're supposed to, and we'll come through the lion's den, no problem. He's not going to change what's going on out there. He's going to make us over it. It's not because of what we're doing. We're paying attention to the word. That's what it is. So, important, real important. Now, here's the last thing. The Persian Empire. Any idea who the Persian Empire is today? Now, think about something. The Persian Empire. It's Iran. If you're talking about the Persian Empire, including where Daniel was, literally Babylon, they're in Iraq. But the Persian Empire came from Persia, Iran. So as they got defeated and moved around and everything, that's their home. That's Iran. That's where it was.
It was still called Persia prior to World War I.
Yes. Yes, it was when you get to World War I, after World War I, you start seeing things like the Balfour Decision, and you start seeing the British mandate starting to come down, where they start slicing up who's going where. They changed the name to Iran. As a matter of fact, the name is Aryan. And yeah, they were connected to Hitler in World War II. Prussia, that's right. So, We see this right now. We go, okay, that's kind of interesting. What's it going to do for me? All right, trip out on this. When you look at this, Iran hates Israel so much that when they are inside their, I don't know what they call it, Congress, when they're taking a vote on something, if it's a yes vote, they will take their shoe off and they will pound on the table and they will say, death to Israel, death to the United States. That means yes. That's how bad they hate Israel and then us as long as we're supporting them. And I'll bet you they're dropping us off that part here real quick with the way that we've been treating them. Everything we have been reading, right, about Iran, their nuclear capability that's been going on. Do you remember when Bibi Netanyahu, he gets up in front of the United Nations and he holds up a big card and it's got a bomb outlined on it and he's got little marks on it going, this is where they're at with the bomb? Well, the reason he's talking that is because he says, we will wipe Israel off the map. These aren't rhetoric. That is an Iranian holding a sign. That is an Iranian sign. That is the Iranian leader saying we will wipe them off the map. That's why they said they can't get the bomb in no extreme. They shouldn't even have nuclear capability. And yet our president goes over there and goes, well, we trust you. You won't do it. And Netanyahu goes, are you kidding me right now? You heard what they said, right? And here we go. You've seen all this stuff that's going on. Do you think that that's possible? That what we're seeing is the fruit of Daniel 6? How far do you roll this clock back? These guys had a stronghold of hating Daniel. So much so that they're arguing with the leader. 2 signet rings had to be put onto that rock. You did sign that, right? He gets so ticked off, he grabs all 500 of that families and everything and throws them down inside there. The leadership had definitely a rift in there. And those 122 dudes that hated Daniel that bad, they hated him to the point to where it cost them their own families. Does that sound like a suicide bomber? The mentality? I'm going to destroy that Jew. If it takes killing me and my family, I'm going to destroy him. And what are we seeing now? It is a spiritual stronghold. The thing that we have got to understand when we read Daniel and we read Revelation is that these are spiritual things that are in play. We're going to see where an angel came and talked to Daniel and he said, I was dispatched the minute you prayed, and it took me 21 days and I had to fight the Prince of Persia. These are spiritual things. Spiritual demonic forces lord over physical areas. Why do we see certain things in San Francisco? Why do we see certain things in Vegas? Why do we see... Same thing. There is a spiritual domination over that area, and it is completely... And who's the one that stands for Israel? Michael. And yet we're seeing this over and over and over. This stronghold that was against him. Think about this. Daniel was in his 80s. 80s. He was not very active in government affairs. They had to pull him out of retirement to read the graffiti on the wall. He didn't go back to Jerusalem when Cyrus said all the Jews could go. Remember? Cyrus set them free. You guys go. And said, here's some money to rebuild the temple when you go back. Daniel didn't go. Daniel stayed here. Less than 50,000 people went. So, who was Daniel hurting? He wasn't converted into a Judaism-based Persia. He wasn't trying to convert anyone. He was a peaceful old man who prayed in the window 3 times a day. That's all he did. He didn't try to hurt anybody. What are the Jews doing today? You are not going to find one, and you know what, and I'll correct that. You will find one incident that the Israeli people were involved in, and it was at the Gulf of Tonkin, and they were tricked into attacking a ship that they were told was something different by our government, and when they attacked it, it started a big mess that led into the Vietnam War. That's the only time you'll see anything negative. When you see terrorist bombers, do you see Israel's? No. Do you ever see hijacking? No. Do you ever see them attacking anybody outside their borders? No. It's all defense. When they went and blew up the stuff that was in Syria, it was chemical weapons that were coming across the border. They have never attacked anybody for anything other than self-defense. Never. All the way back to King David. Never. Yet for some reason, the spiritual influence that we're seeing here, it dominates and it hovers and it controls. So they conspired to kill him. And these men and their families, they were killed because they had a stronghold concerning Daniel. How much of this hatred continued in the legends and stories passed down from those families? How much of the legends went down and said, your great-grandfather died because of a Jew? Your whole family, our family was damaged because a Jew got thrown into a lion's den. And it just built and built and built and built until this anger and this hatred, you could cut it with a knife, willing to kill your own family over it. I found that real interesting when I got down, and I told my family, we were sitting there talking, and I said, you know how many times I've looked at this stuff and I thought, that's a children's story, right? Daniel the Lion's Den. It's cute. He goes down, he lives, kitty kitty, get out, it's all good. You start looking at this and you go, oh my goodness. If that is not a perfect picture of where we're at today, I don't know what is. And you're seeing it constantly on the news, constantly on the news. And as far as prophetically is concerned, it plays a big part, along with some others. If you want to write things up, write down Psalm 83. Psalm 83 is on the verge of starting to happen right now. So when we see Daniel in the lion's den, there's a whole lot more than an old man that stuck to his guns. There was an old man that had a spiritual attack going on. And the enemy was coming down. And he stood. He stood and he stood and he stood. And he showed that God was God. Just like it's going to happen when it comes down again and they try to do the same thing. They're going to stand. The ones that stand will go. The ones that won't will fall. So there's Daniel in the lion's den. New perspective, right? Next week we'll go chapter 7. Chapter 7, Daniel 7, the times of the Gentiles. You're going to find in Luke 21, it talks about the Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are complete. So we'll go through that and check that out.